The Vrethkai have never been defeated in an audit proceeding. This is not arrogance, it is simply a fact stated the way facts are stated. They bring the framework, they apply the framework. The framework produces a score. The score determines the outcome. The framework has never failed to produce a score. This is important context for what happened when David said, "I need to show you 41 seconds of footage before we continue." Preth was in the way of someone who has a schedule and is already internally nodding that this is going to push the afternoon session. Patient. He indicated that 41 seconds was acceptable. The footage began. A parking lot, rain, one human female, 8 bags, one child, keys in her teeth. Preth watched, Koval watched. The footage ran, nothing exploded. No one demonstrated a combat technique. The woman shifted the child, tried the key, opened the door, loaded the bags, loaded the child, sat down, put her forehead on the steering wheel, started the car. 41 seconds. The footage ended. Preth looked at David. "What is the strength domain being demonstrated?" he asked. "All of them," David said, "simultaneously, under conditions that have been sustained without interruption for 2 years, every Thursday. The output levels are not exceptional." "No," David agreed, "they are not." "Then I am not certain what you are asking us to assess." "I am asking you," David said, "to tell me what she scores." Preth looked at the evaluation terminal. He looked at the framework. He looked at the 5 domains. He looked at the footage timestamp. He looked at Koval. Koval was looking at the form. The form had a required field, classification of strength type. The drop-down menu had 47 options. Koval went through them. Then he went through them again. "Physical force generation," he said. "The load weight is 19 kilograms plus 12. Peak output score, moderate." "Moderate," Preth confirmed. "Endurance duration," Koval paused. 22 hours continuous. But the assessment rubric requires a defined endpoint to calculate endurance score. There is no defined endpoint in the data. There was a silence. "File it as incomplete data," Preth said, but he said it the way someone says something when they are still deciding whether it is true. "Cognitive processing under threat." Koval was reading from Senna's report now. She was sequencing logistics in real time. Load distribution, child positioning, ground surface conditions, locking mechanism failure, child escalation response. Simultaneous processing of 6 active variables. The threat level is classified as. "There is no threat classification for this scenario," Koval said. "The rubric requires an external threat agent. There is no external threat agent. The load is the threat. The continuity is the threat." He looked at the form. The form did not have a field for the continuity, is the threat. "Collective coordination index," Koval continued. "She is operating alone. Score her as a unit of 1. A unit of 1 scores 0 on the coordination index. The index measures inter-unit cooperation. Then she scores 0. She scores 0, Koval said, because the framework assumes strength requires witnesses. The room was quiet. Preth stood up. He walked to the screen. He looked at the frozen final frame, the woman's car pulling out of the parking lot, brake lights red in the rain. "Resource acquisition efficiency," he said. "She retrieved necessary resources for household unit maintenance." "Score within normal parameters," Koval said. "Then her combined score is." He calculated. The number was below the retention threshold. By the framework, by every domain, by every rubric and drop-down and required field, Alina Vasquez, and by extension the species she had been unwittingly drafted to represent in this proceeding, scored below retention threshold. Preth looked at the number. He looked at the footage. He looked at the number again. He did not say anything for a long time. Phase 7, the detonation. What broke, and something broke in that room, though it made no sound and left no visible mark, was not the framework. The framework remained intact. Technically, every field had been completed, every domain had a score. The combined score was what it was. What broke was the confidence that the framework was measuring, what they had always believed it was measuring. Preth had assessed 17 civilizations. He had watched 17 species demonstrate their strongest moments, their warriors, their champions, their peak expressions of what they could be. He had scored them. He had filed the absorption orders. He had believed, not cruelly but completely, that he was measuring strength. He sat back down. "Play it again," he said. Koval played it again. They watched it a second time. The bags, the child, the rain, the key. The 11 seconds with her forehead on the wheel. "How many humans," Preth said slowly, "are doing this, right now, at this moment?" David had prepared for many questions. He had not prepared for that one because he had not expected Preth to ask it. He pulled up the population data. "Rough estimate," he said, "based on care dependency ratios, working hours, single household rates, and supply retrieval patterns." "Yes. Somewhere between 300 and 400 million, David said, "at any given moment. Across time zones, accounting for sleep cycles, the number is continuous. There is no moment in a 24-hour period when this is not happening somewhere on Earth." Preth was still. "It does not stop," David said, "not as an argument, just as a fact delivered the way Senna delivered the Thursday data, plainly, without interpretation, trusting the weight of the thing to carry itself." "The Thursday after the Thursday," Preth said. "Yes." Koval had stopped writing. He was looking at the form, the required field, classification of strength type, 47 options in the dropdown. He closed the form. He did not file it. Preth looked at the data. He looked at it the way someone looks at something they have been walking past their entire life and have just, for the first time, actually seen. "Our framework," he said, "measures the moment of lift." "Yes," David said. "It does not measure what holds the lift." "No." "Because we assumed," Preth stopped. He was a precise person, and precise people stop before completing sentences they are not sure are true. He started again. "We assumed that the moment of maximum output was the complete expression, that everything else was recovery, preparation, negative space." "What if the negative space," David said, "is the structure?" The room held that. Koval was looking at his notes. 17 civilizations. All of them had been assessed on their peaks, their champions, their weapons, their greatest single expressions of what they could produce. None of them had been assessed on their Thursdays. None of them had been asked what happened after the peak, in the parking lot in the rain, when no one was watching and the form didn't cover it, and you still had to get the child in the car. "I cannot file the absorption order," Koval said. Preth looked at him. "I cannot complete the required field. The classification does not exist in our taxonomy. I cannot file an incomplete form." There was a long silence. "No," Preth said, "you cannot." He began to pack the evaluation terminal. He did not do it quickly. He did it the way he did everything, precisely, completely in order. He closed each case. He secured each lock. He stood up and straightened his jacket. He looked at David. "We will need to review our taxonomy," he said, "before we can complete this assessment." David said nothing. His face did the thing Chelhari faces do when we are holding more than we are showing, a slight stillness, a quality of internal weather. "This may take some time," Preth said. "Take all the time you need," David said. The Vrethkai left. They did not file the absorption order. They have not, as of the writing of this report, returned. Phase 8 decline and the mirror. The Chelhari filed their own report 17 days later. It was not the report the Vrethkai had commissioned. The Vrethkai had commissioned a standard strength assessment, 5 domains, combined score, retention recommendation. We did not file that report. We filed something else. Davith wrote the opening. Senna wrote the observational section. The rest of us contributed in the distributed way that Chelhari contribute to things that matter not in turns but all at once from every angle. The report begins with the footage. It always begins with the footage. Then it describes what the Chelhari understands strength to mean now, after 43 days of watching humans in one parking lot and 11 seconds with a forehead on a steering wheel. Strength, the report argues, is not the peak. The peak is easy to see. The peak is designed to be seen. The peak has an audience. The peak performs. Strength is what happens after the audience leaves. Strength is the load that has no defined endpoint. It is the logistics run in real time under conditions no rubric anticipated. It is the recovery that looks, from the outside, like nothing, like a woman sitting in a parked car, forehead down, for 11 seconds, and is, from the inside, the whole architecture of continuing. The report was translated into 47 languages. It was cited 11 times in the Vrethkai's internal taxonomy review. The review is ongoing. They have not, to our knowledge, filed an absorption order for any species since the proceeding in that meeting room. We do not know if this is causation or coincidence. The Vrethkai do not share their internal deliberations. We know that Koval submitted a formal request to expand the classification taxonomy by 1 entry. The entry name he proposed is not a Vrethkai word, it is a human one. He proposed calling it endurance. Not the athletic kind, the kind that means duration, the kind the rubric already has a field for. The other kind. The kind that doesn't have a finish line and doesn't ask for witnesses and doesn't stop when the form runs out of fields. The request is, as of this filing, still pending approval. The last line of the Chelhari report, the one that has been copied more than any other, was written by Senna. She wrote it at 2 a.m. local station time, alone at her observation terminal, which is where she writes the things she is not sure the collective is ready to hold but files anyway. It reads, "We were asked to define strength. We spent 43 days looking at soldiers and athletes and engineers. Then we looked at a parking lot. The parking lot was more than we could classify. We pointed at it anyway. We said, there, that. Whatever you want to call it, it is that. The thing that keeps going, not because it was built for this, not because someone is watching, not because the form has a field for it, but because the child is in the car and it is Thursday and there is another Thursday coming, and the only answer to that is to start the car. We do not know what the Vrethkai will decide. We do not know if their taxonomy will expand. We do not know if they will return with new forms and new fields, and a classification system wide enough to hold what we put in front of them. We know that somewhere right now, in the ordinary unglamorous middle of an ordinary unglamorous day, someone is carrying more than they were designed to carry, across wet asphalt, in rain that is not trying to make a point, toward a car that may or may not open on the first try. No one is assessing them. No one is watching. The form doesn't cover it. They are doing it anyway. We would ask you, reading this, in whatever civilization you have built, with whatever frameworks you use to measure what matters, we would ask you what score that receives in your taxonomy. We would ask you who designed your taxonomy. We would ask you whether the designer had ever carried groceries. End of report. Chelhari Diplomatic Memory, Cycle 7, Thread 44. Classification, pending. Filed by Davith, Senior Archivist with Senna, Junior Observer. Form 31, incomplete, submitted anyway.